I've been meaning to make this video for a little bit, and I'm happy to finally get to it. Today I'm going to talk about the Fujifilm X-E2. If you've seen my videos before, and if you're a subscriber, welcome back. If you have seen my videos before and haven't subscribed, either way, just double check actually to see if that button says subscribed or not. I've noticed this recently where YouTube will feed me a lot of videos from content creators I really like, so much so that I actually forget that I'm not subscribed to a few of them. So it's good. It's a good idea for me to kindly remind you to check the subscribe button and subscribe if you haven't. If you're new to this channel, if you searched for the Fujifilm X-E2 or found my videos based on the recipes I created or some of my other gear reviews, welcome. I do a lot of Fujifilm related topics here. Of course, I do some film photography topics. I have a decent back library of videos about Canon gear. So I appreciate you checking this channel out, and I hope you will find something that you enjoy, and I hope you will find this channel worthy of your subscription. Okay, so let's get to the main subject of the day, the Fujifilm X-E2. A little bit of context to when and why I got this camera. I've been going back and forth the past couple of years between trying to concentrate on only one main digital camera and then going to a second one and then going back to a single one. But now I'm back to the situation where I have multiple digital cameras, but only temporary. Around March, April, I started to get the itch again to get a second Fujifilm body to shoot street photography with. If you follow the channel for a while, you know I had the X-T1 for a bit. I actually sold that just so I could concentrate on the X-H1 as my only camera for a while. But I realized after a bit that, you know, maybe I shouldn't have sold the X-T1. It was good to have a second Fujifilm camera around. I love my X-H1 and it's my main camera, but my challenge is keeping something for video and having something for photo that I can have as backup and rotate between the cameras. So I wanted to find a secondhand used Fujifilm camera as a everyday carry type camera for street photography, for travel, or what have you. I also wanted to try this line of X-E cameras from Fujifilm. I had never given them a shot before this year, so I was excited to give them a shot. So I started searching for the X-E1, X-E2, X-E3 on the used market. In May or early June, I think I found the X-E1 first, and I already did some videos on this. I found the X-E1 and started shooting with it, took it on a trip, and was really impressed with the image output and everything about the camera in that regard. There was a couple things that not disappointed me, but I was had some higher hopes for a few things on there. But it's overall, it's a really great camera and the output's awesome. But I still wanted to try the X-E2, and not long after I found that one, I found a used X-E2 that I picked up. So other than that trip I took to South Carolina when I took the X-E1 as my only camera on that trip, I came home and started rotating between the two a bit, between the X-E1, X-E2, to kind of see which one I would want to keep, which one would be like my main everyday carry street photography camera. And this is the X-E2 that I picked up. It's the black version. I had no preconceived idea about which one I would buy. I was open to the black or the silver versions of these cameras. But just a little backstory on the X-E2 itself. It was released in October of 2013, or announced in October. I'm not sure if it shipped that month or not. But it's an interesting release schedule, considering it wasn't but a year or so before that the X-E1 actually was released. So there wasn't a huge gap between some of these X-Trans 1 cameras and these X-Trans 2 cameras that started to come out. And the X-E2 was around for a few years before it was replaced by a second version of this camera, the X-E2S. And after the X-E2S came out, there was a firmware update for the X-E2 that brought a lot of what the X-E2S had to the X-E2, including menu and interface tweaks and redesigns, as well as additions to these film simulations, specifically Classic Chrome. So like I said already, this has the X-Trans 2 sensor. The X-E1 had the X-Trans 1. So the X-Trans 2 is in this camera. It's in the X-T10, X-T1, X-E2S, obviously, and the X-70. So far out of that group, I've only tried the X-T1 and X-E2. But if you've seen my videos on the X-T1, a lot of the positives that I liked about the output of that camera apply pretty much to this camera, since they have the same sensor and processor. The X-T1, even though I sold it, is one of my favorite cameras I've ever owned. I was really blown away by everything about that camera. Even though I bought it, 6 years after its release and whatnot, it was still a really, really great value and an awesome camera. Since I bought and sold it, the prices of everything on the used Fujifilm market have gone up. So the value of these cameras changes almost on a daily basis, because what you might pay $200 for it now might be $300-400 a few months from now. So I had very little doubt that I was going to like the image quality and the image output from this camera, since I had owned the X-T1 before and I was quite familiar with the sensor and processor. I knew what it was capable of. But let's talk about some of the awesome stuff about this camera specifically. And one of the biggest things you'll notice right away, much like the X-E1, is that it's got really, really solid build quality. It's mostly magnesium alloy, the body and the metal top, and the dials are metal as well, and they feel of high quality. But so just overall, the build quality feels pretty solid. This is one of those things where if you just pick it up and start using it, you're gonna be impressed with the build quality. If you sat there and had 5 or 6 other cameras like the X-T1, X-T2, and so on, and you sat there and compared it, then you might be able to pick out some build quality differences, or some differences where they may have used cheaper material or parts in certain areas in order to get that price down. But if you're just holding this camera and not really comparing it to anything else, it's really, really well made. And even if you compare it to a lot of things, especially other camera brands, this is pretty impressive build quality. A lot of what I said about the X-E1 that I like about this one as well. Like I said, the build quality is nice. I think that they made some minor tweaks, but yet they were improvements on the buttons themselves. I feel like they have a little better tactile feel on this camera than the X-E1. I like that there is a few more customizable buttons on this one, which is really nice. If you are a aperture priority or a shutter priority, or even an automatic shooter, there's one more stop on the exposure compensation dial, which is cool. The screen is really nice, and the EVF is pretty impressive. Like I said in my X-E1 video, the EVF of both of these cameras is what I was worried about before I jumped into this X-E line. And now that I've used both the X-E1 and X-E2, I can say it's not really that big a deal. Yes, they are nowhere near the X-T1. They're nowhere near the other cameras, but it's to be expected. Those cameras are higher on the product line, and some of those are newer cameras. So, of course, it's not a super fair comparison, but that was one of my concerns, being so used to those kinds of viewfinders. Would I be able to adapt and get comfortable with these viewfinders? And yeah, they're totally adequate. A lot of my thoughts on this are kind of general thoughts that could be applied to other cameras as well. Some I mentioned in the X-E1 video, where this is just a personal thing to me that it's been kind of difficult for me to get used to using a rangefinder style camera where the viewfinder is all the way to one side. I've just used actual SLRs or mirrorless cameras that look like SLRs almost my entire time doing photography. So anything that has a different form factor just takes a bit of getting used to. You build up a lot of muscle memory about picking up the camera and putting your eye to a certain spot. But having both of these cameras, the X-E1 and X-E2, for a few months now has helped me start to get used to it, and it's definitely something that would become second nature if I kept shooting. But if you use rangefinder style cameras, then this is obviously not going to be an issue at all for you. But if you are more an SLR style camera user like me, it's just something to keep in mind. It just takes a little bit to get used to, and it might take you a bit for it to become second nature for you. So like I said in the early part of this video, is that this was released in 2013, and when it was released, in the early firmware of this camera operated in a very similar way as the X-E1. But when the X-E2S was released, by this time they had redesigned the menu system, the interface, the EVF display, graphics, and whatnot. And a firmware update changed all of that in this camera as well. So if you have this camera, or if you're looking at this camera and if it has the old firmware, I think the old one is anything under 4.0, I think. I'll have to check on that. But either way, make sure you have the latest firmware, and it brings a lot of new and convenient features to the camera, including classic chrome, which is one of my favorite film simulations. One thing I really like about both this and the X-E1 is just it has a nice weight to it. I can never put it in perfect words what the ideal weight is for me with a camera. It's just a feeling thing. You know, you pick a camera up and you can feel, you can just feel if there's a good balance to it with the lenses that you might have when you're carrying it around and lifting it up. It's just it's a personal preference thing, and it's just something that I like to have. It's just a well-balanced camera, a camera that feels good to carry around when you're walking around for quite a while on the street. So it has the same very similar ergonomics as the X-E1, obviously, in terms of the shutter speed dial, the exposure compensation dial, and the basic button layout is essentially the same as the X-E1. But there's a few button differences, like the AF lock and auto exposure lock buttons are separated. They're not one button now. There's an extra function button on the left side here. So there's a couple tweaks, and a few of those buttons are more customizable than the X-E1 was. But for the most part, operationally, it's very similar. Like I mentioned in the X-E1 video, the drawbacks that I disliked about the X-E1 was in relation to how it focused, both autofocus and the focus assist tools. This remedies all that. The autofocus on here is more than adequate for my uses. I'm not shooting wildlife or sports or any fast-moving subjects, but I still like snappy and fairly quick autofocus, and this definitely delivers. It reminds me of the X-T1. I'd have to sit there and compare to see which one's faster or not, but it reminds me of the X-T1, and it's relatively fast and snappy with the autofocus. I'm mostly a center point autofocus person. I rarely, use super wide zones and whatnot. But again, I still like fast, consistent, and relatively low light capable autofocus. And this has performed really well in that regard. Also, in terms of manual focus, this has pretty solid focus peaking. Like I said, I sold an X-T1, but part of me thinks this might have better, or at least the same quality as focus peaking as the X-T1. That would make sense, it's the same processor and sensor, but I'm not sure if they tweak those, but at all between some of the models and whatnot. But the focus peaking is great. So it has some of those focus assist tools that we've become accustomed to with some of these newer cameras. So would be a great camera to use with manual focus lenses if you're adapting old lenses, or if you're getting some of these really cool lenses that are coming out from Voigtlander, and there's some from 7 Artisans and TC Artisans, and there's a whole bunch of interesting manual focus lenses for the Fujifilm lineup. So it's really exciting. So having some focus assist options is really beneficial and useful, and something I use all the time. This has a wireless connectivity, which allows you to connect it with the Fujifilm app on your phone and transfer photos. I know the app is not the best. A lot of people have bad experiences with the app. My experience has been a little hit and miss myself. For the most part, it's worked out relatively well. It actually has been convenient sometimes. When I want to share something to Instagram, I can transfer it to my phone wirelessly. But wireless connectivity is not a make or break feature for me. That's just one of those things where it's nice to use when it's on the camera. I'll get to some photo samples soon, but I'm trying to think of any other key things to talk about. But I love this camera. It's a great camera. But a side note, just so I can give some context to how I'm going to wrap this video up and what my recommendation is, or what my general thoughts on the camera is. Also recently, and I haven't talked about this on the video yet, you may have seen it on Instagram, is I picked up AU's X-T20. And basically the main reason I did this is because I want a small B camera for video. And since I shoot video with my X-H1, having something that at least has some form of 4K and it has the X-Trans 3 sensor in it was going to be a good option, and this checks those boxes. And obviously it's going to be a great stills camera as well, since I know the X-Trans 3 sensor very well, and I love the images that come out of that. With that being said, I did pick this up recently for to match my X-H1 as a B camera for both video and stills. Granted, it doesn't shoot the same quality video as the X-H1, but it has solid video. So now that I have that, I have to decide exactly what I'm going to do with these two, the X-E1 and X-E2. This camera is so good that if I had no video concerns at all, if I was strictly shooting stills and didn't have a YouTube channel and had really no desire to do anything video related, this could be my only photography camera. This could be my only stills camera. This and a couple lenses, maybe some old manual focus lenses and some adapters, and I'd be good to go. This checks all the boxes for me for street photography and all the type of photography I like to shoot. This would do it all. And so with the X-T1 and most likely the X-T10, but my point is this would be and could be my only camera. And I imagine that's the case for many of you. If you're looking for an affordable, relatively affordable entry point into photography in general, or an entry point into the Fujifilm lineup, I can't think of a much better option right now than this one. You could argue about value, and you could argue about which features are more important. You can argue about the differences in image output from sensor to sensor. But now this changes on a daily basis or a weekly basis at least. But where prices are right now, I think this might be the best value. X-T10 might give it a run for its money, because these rangefinder style cameras, the X-E1 and X-E2, the prices of those have gone up because they've just been really popular lately, so the demand is high. The X-T10 prices have dropped a little bit, and it's just because where the trends are headed. So this in the X-T10 might be pretty close to a tie in terms of the best value. But right now, I think this might be the best value street photography camera on the market right now, in terms of at least Fujifilm system, at least the stuff I'm familiar with. I can't speak for all the other brands, but this is just what draws my eye and what has everything that I like and look for. All right, a lot of people didn't understand, or maybe I just wasn't clear on my thoughts on the X-E1. Like wasn't talking anything bad about the X-E1 last time with this video. My whole point is I was just so surprised at how much this cost at the time, and still right now, if you, depending on where you look, but the prices fluctuate so much. But when I made that video, and when I bought this, the price between these two, the difference between these two was like $30 difference between these two cameras. And my bottom line point with all that is that for me personally, that $30 difference, I'll pay $30 more for this camera over this camera. What I hope might happen is that these prices fall back to normal, and this falls back to more around $200 US consistently, maybe sometimes fall even below. At 200 or below, this is a steal. I would get that any day, and I would recommend anyone else get that any day. When they're both landing around the $300 mark, I think this is the way to go if you don't have either one yet and you're looking. The differences between the X-Trans 1 and X-Trans 2 are subtle enough overall. This is a generalization. The difference between the X-Trans 1 and X-Trans 2 are subtle enough that I think that the benefits that this has, besides the sensor, are worth that price difference. I've shot both cameras, and I don't see one having a clear advantage in terms of if you're just comparing image output. One thing I like about the X-E2, it's not a huge deal, but it is a benefit sometimes, is that it has 14-bit RAW files, and the X-E1 has 12-bit RAW files. Yes, the JPEGs are great, but I'm a RAW and JPEG shooter, and most of the time I still edit my RAWs to get the image I want. Every once in a while the JPEG just is spot on, and I just keep that, and that's my final image. But for the most part, I edit my RAW files, and having as much data there to work with to give me the most dynamic range I can, and give me the most flexibility I can, is always welcome. And having a 14-bit file versus a 12-bit file just gives you a little more flexibility. There are differences between the X-Trans 1 and X-Trans 2 as far as output goes, but I guess, like I said, they're subtle, and they're just differences. I don't think one's necessarily clearly better than the other. I've become really accustomed to the X-Trans 2 sensor and really enjoy the output, and the other features on this camera are really impressive, and everything else about it is just really enjoyable to use. So yes, both of these are great rangefinder style cameras. They both shoot 16 megapixels. The megapixels are the exact same. There's a lot of similarities here. Either camera, the X-E1 or X-E2, either one are great entries into the Fujifilm system. Both are great entries into photography. Awesome street photography cameras. If you're worried about megapixel count, don't be. These kick out awesome images that you can print pretty large. You can edit them and push them pretty far in post. And like many people have said before, and I can vouch for as well, is that the JPEGs that come out of these cameras are awesome. So you just have a lot of flexibility and choices to create cool stuff with these cameras. And this right now is the top of my list for value, cameras that provide value, in terms of where they're priced today on the used market. So this review is a little all over the place in terms of I didn't have my clear categories laid out and whatnot. Kind of like my X-H1 video, I kind of just wanted to say, like, yeah, I'm kind of biased with this because I already knew I was going to like the sensor and the output from that sensor and all these things. There was a lot I knew I was going to like about it, and it delivered on everything else that I was curious about. So I think it's a pretty great buy, and it's a camera that you probably wouldn't be disappointed with, especially if you're doing the style of photography I like to do, street photography. scenic stuff. I'd like to do some small city detail scenes and mood shots and stuff like that. It'd be really good for landscape as well. 16 megapixels is plenty for some great landscape shots. You don't have the same cropping capability, but still you have plenty of detail there. And you have a camera, you get, for $300 or so, you get a camera that you can put the Fujifilm lenses on, and that's huge. I mean, to get into a system like this right now, when there's new lenses coming out all the time from Fujifilm, from third-party brands now, it's a really exciting time to jump into this system. And the X-E2 and yes, the X-E1 as well are great entry points, and that gets you a rangefinder style, which is a pretty classic type design. And it gets you going with that kind of camera for some really cool photography. So I guess that's it for now. I mean, my bottom line is that this is an awesome camera and a great deal, and I can recommend it pretty much to anyone, unless you're the classic caveat, sports, wildlife, and whatnot. But other than that, I can pretty much recommend it to anyone. It's a really quality camera and a really good buy. And now I'm kind of curious, though, to try the X-E3 and X-E4 just to see what the differences are in weight, design, and the whole bit. But right now, what's next for me is deciding what to keep. So you've seen I have 4 Fujifilm cameras at this point. I only want to keep 2 because I don't want to be a camera collector. I hate having cameras that are great cameras that should be used, not being used. It's better for me to give these to or sell these to people that are going to use them on a daily basis. So that's what the idea is, just deciding which ones I want to keep. But it's very, very tempting to keep one of these at least and the X-T20. But I'm going to have to debate all this. But that's it for now. Why don't you let me know in the comments if you have the X-E2 and what your thoughts are on it, and what your thoughts are on the best value Fujifilm camera on the used market currently. What are the prices that you're finding if you're outside of the US? Let me know what the prices of these cameras are in your area. Thanks as always for watching, and again, hit that subscribe button if you haven't. I really appreciate the support, and I will see you guys again soon.